History knows many instances when people discovered or rediscovered something new, but they were not believed, yet they were proved to be right later. Here's several examples. When the concept of electromagnetic waves was first proposed around 1864, it was met with great skepticism. As a result, the idea languished for a long time. Alfred Wegener proposed that Earth's continents move very slowly. Wegener's theory of continental drift was rejected by most other scientists during his lifetime. Ignaz Semmelweis published evidence that when doctors washed their hands before examining or treating patients, the mortality rate for women in his birthing ward in Vienna, Austria, was greatly reduced. Although Semmelweis cut death rates in his own hospital, his attempts to spread the word failed. Worse, he got clinically depressed when his work was rejected and started behaving odd. Later, he was lured into an insane asylum, beat up, and put into a straitjacket. He died 2 weeks later, presumably from his injuries. The idea of the Earth rotating around the Sun and not being the center of the universe was rejected numerous times. And there's a lot more, including some Nobel Prize winners' ideas being at first rejected for being too removed from reality and for other reasons. People had to learn their lesson from history, but didn't. I note from my own experience almost unsuccessfully trying to share with people my knowledge and findings regarding the real existence of auras, telekinesis, reincarnation, etc. I think we need a system where people are not going to either of the extremes and are right in the middle. They don't reject all new ideas and discoveries, but they also don't blindly believe everything. They stay neutral until they have proof evidence to either back up the idea or reject it. We could have a panel of educated people whose job it would be to test and check the proposed ideas and discoveries, obviously if none is harmed by the experience. Of course, there'd be a lot more details to the system, but they're not important for now. For example, about 100 educated and open-minded people could try to learn telekinesis. Even if just several people would be successful, it would still be enough to show it is real. Because if telekinesis is not real, then literally nobody can move objects with just their will or mind. The same goes for auras, astral projection, and more. I literally described how I was able to experience all those things, and so can almost anyone. But for some reason, one of the reasons I think is due to psychology, it's just so difficult for them to allocate several minutes per day for, let's say, learning to see auras by following my example. Instead of having beliefs, people would have knowledge. Those abilities are not gifts. I think that all more or less healthy people can learn them, and they are sure not magical. There's no magic but knowledge. I learned them in my early 20s, and before I wanted to live just like pretty much all people. Have work, make money, have a house, have a family. Live a so-called normal life. What was considered normal at the time? Spiritual or esoteric stuff wasn't on my mind. Also, from early childhood, I knew that some things do actually exist, while people generally don't believe in their existence. And there was a moment in my life when I was reading a lot about ufology-related subjects. I'll mention that before my 20s, I never even tried to practice seeing auras or do telekinesis. In case someone thinks that you need to develop such abilities from early childhood. No, you don't. I've noticed that people often try to explain why such things are not possible by some information they learned from either school or from some other source, like a book or religious text. For some reason, those people don't understand that, in the first case, scientists and researchers could have been mistaken, as they were in the examples of people who were not believed at first, but were proven right later. In the second case, if the origin of the religious text was legit, then during many centuries the message could have been distorted, or even intentionally changed by some malevolent group wishing to take masses of people under their control. Honestly, it amazes me that even when you say that you prove to yourself these things are real, you experience them, Many people still search for other explanations instead of trying to listen to you. They have ears, but they hear not, as the saying goes. And then some of the so-called scientists and professors choose to call your names instead of having normal civilized conversation with the goal to set up a meeting for me to try to prove telekinesis and many other things. Such was the case with the person who calls himself Professor Dave Explains. I will say that his videos are very good, informative and educational, but only as far as the generally accepted subjects are concerned. Instead of calling me names, he could have used the scientific method of following on my claims, on having many people try to do what I did and see if they can learn to see auras, etheric field, or move light suspended thread telekinetically. He called me a delusional moron, and I noticed the following. Definition of delusional is characterized by or holding false beliefs or judgments about external reality that are held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary. And the other definition is based on or having faulty judgment, mistaken. Well, when it comes to Dave's views on auras, etheric field, and all other little known things, which are called etheric by some people, he is kinda delusional. For, despite being offered a way to prove the reality of those things, he chooses to hold false judgment that they don't exist, and people who say otherwise should be charlatans or delusional morons. And the word moron means a stupid person. Well, as a professor he should know about the history of science. He should know that there have been numerous times when people were not believed, and even beaten up to death for their attempts to help society. And yet they were proven right. I know that I once more mentioned this fact, but I feel like it's an important historic lesson, which clearly wasn't learned by many people. And it's a simple thing to understand. So why is it that it was Dave who was behaving like a child in his response to me? He's no better than people who didn't believe Alfred Wegener, Ignaz Semmelweis, Nicholas Copernicus, and others. If humanity doesn't destroy itself, I think relatively soon, which could be a century, people will start to discover that auras, telekinesis, reincarnation, and so on are real. Perhaps then Dave will become yet another example for future generations, how one should not act in a civilized society. I'll say that I did mistakes of varying magnitude in my life. I'm okay admitting it because it's natural to make mistakes. It's part of our learning experience. Also, those words of his have nothing to do with me, because I know that I am correct regarding the existence of etheric field. I've seen it several times, and I also know about it from Selbo book. For your information, I am well aware that there were also claims and discoveries which were wrong. That's why I say we should be in the middle between two extremes. Stay neutral until we have proof and evidence to either back up a claim or reject it. And we should always remember that as long as we don't know all there is to know in the universe, there is a possibility that people had either made mistakes in their discoveries, or their discoveries were incorrect for their time, but were enhanced afterwards, as more knowledge had been gained. The example of latter here could be Newton's and Einstein's views on gravity and how it works. The main Newton's idea is correct, but some details have been proved to be wrong. And the example pertaining to the topics of auras, telekinesis, etc. would be Darwin, who was correct in his theory, but not all of it is true. As it turns out, human beings in the universe jumped over the process of evolution, and were always humans from the very start of their existence. Sure, as a result of environmental influences, people's appearances have changed and do change. But people will always be people. Creatures with 9 bodies. And animals will always be animals. Creatures with 3 bodies. That's why people are able to learn to see auras. Even so, literally hundreds of generations never even practiced developing their auric vision. People were created with that ability. And it's up to us to discover it and develop it. That ability will not be lost due to natural evolution. Of course, Darwin couldn't have known that, but it shows that people should not assume that they know everything. and should not place their discoveries automatically onto everything or everyone else. Next, I have 2 telekinesis videos showing telekinesis. Yes, the quality could have been better, but I can buy expensive equipment just to record several videos not many people watch anyway. Some people asked if static electricity could be the reason for the effect. No, it's not static electricity. Given stationary hand and some object, static electricity would either only repel or only attract that object. And in my videos it's clear that the tip of the thread sometimes attracts and right after that repels from the tip of the finger very quickly. Sometimes it touches the finger and sometimes it doesn't. I explained in video why. I have trouble keeping attention due to recent events happening around me and with me. So, unfortunately, I can't keep telekinetic control for a long time. Also, I can, let's say for now, feel in my mind that the tip of the thread is moving according to my will, and not because of some other factors. It is 100% telekinesis. I wouldn't be posting those videos if it wasn't. There were still people who were telling me that telekinesis is not real and can't be a thing. I'm reminded here about the story of doubting Thomas, who wanted to touch Christ's wound after his resurrection, for seeing them with his own eyes did not convince him enough, and yet, when he touched them, he was still doubtful. He suspected some kind of magic trick. My offer to try to prove telekinesis in public to try to help people realize that there are many little known but real things out there is left literally unnoticed or ignored. People should remember that inaction, silence is still a decision and has a consequence. If it's a mistaken decision, the one which contributed somehow to someone's suffering, then they will have to suffer for it to hopefully learn their lesson. And now a few words about charlatans. Sadly, there are many of those, and many prey on people seeking spiritual enlightenment. In my opinion, they are partly the reason for the existence of such heavy skepticism I've met in my life. But one simply can't reject an idea or discovery because some people used similar ideas to fool people into giving them their money and other possessions. Again, that's why we have to develop a new system to check claims and new discoveries. We shouldn't reject ideas because they simply seem too removed from our current view of reality. We should remember that the current view of reality that we have has been shaped by people of similar faiths also. As I said before, I'm willing to try to prove telekinesis and, if asked, other things. Also, I'd need a lot of practice for that and a lot of tranquility in my life. For now, the first step is about proving that people can move light objects with their minds, without physically touching them or by using devices other than their own mind, their will. How telekinesis works on physical level is not so important at this time, because it's the second step, which is logically generally not possible without people first acknowledging that telekinesis does actually exist. For people who want proof, I'd like to read Saul's words from the book Selba, the Golden Planet. Jesus was 50 years of age when he arrived in Japan, where he married and had 3 daughters. Finally, he died in the Japanese village of Shingo, where he had lived for 45 years. He was buried in Shingo, which is on the main island of Japan, Honshu, and beside his tomb is another, containing the little box holding Ulrike's lock of hair. Those of your fellow men who like evidence can go to Shingo, formerly known as Herai, in the district of Aomori. About 1/3 of a century has passed since Michel de Marquet published his book, but as far as I know, nobody tried to conduct official and well-documented, on cameras at least, excavations to see the box with the hair. It would prove that Michel's book is true. Of course, there are lots of other ways to prove that Michel's book is true. Some of you may ask, why it's so important for me that I continue to try to share Michel de Marquet's book and my experience with the albums, which proved to me that Michel's book was true. The message of Semmelweis is very important, and the details Semmelweis shared about life can greatly improve people's well-being. That knowledge did help me a lot and played the key role in bringing me out of a huge psychological hole I was in. I understood many simple truths of life by studying that book. All of that helped me. Then Semmelweis were very clear about the dangers of pollution of the environment. Humanity can disappear because of our civilized, in quotes, activity. All know, if people are spiritual, good-willing, and civilized, then I'll benefit from it too, since I have to live in this society. Having my experience with Salo and others from Saluba, I couldn't be silent and had to overcome my fears of speaking out. Silence and doing nothing would be an error for which I'd have to pay by suffering. And I had a lot of that in my life. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.